Okay, then. This is Drawing Me Out with Bill Willingham. I'm Bill Willingham, and as always, the Mr. Interlocutor, the Che to my Evita is Brad Tomte. Say hello, Brad Tomte.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? You say as always, one of these times I might not be here. You know that, right? You'll be on
Are
your
you
own.
quit? Are you
I don't
planning to
think
quit
no, my contract is for, the end of time, so I'm here.
till the end of time? Okay.
Yep.
So our subject this time around, since we explore the dark and sometimes not quite so dark, but always slimy underbelly of the pop culture movement, the pop culture industry, the insider's look at pop culture. We're going to talk about role playing games this time, and specifically what is and is not, what are and are not. I'm not sure which is correct. Let's go with what are and are not role playing games.
Okay.
Brad, do you have any opinions on this?
Well, let's start by letting folks know. Obviously, they know your background in role-playing games. I've been a player since the mid '80s, and I also worked in the industry in the distribution end of things at one of the major wholesalers. So I
ChessX, back when it used to be called ChessX.
That's right, the way it should be.
Uh,
So I surrounded myself with role-playing games, and so I probably have a strong opinion. Maybe not as strong as yours, but there you go. So we're going to cuss and discuss.
well, definition role playing games are those games in which you, the player, play a role in a storytelling kind of community experience. It's usually run by a game master or dungeon master. Dungeon master was the very first term back when Dungeons and Dragons was the only role playing game. But now the more generic term game master because there are many subjects, many genres, many scenarios in which people role play. Is that conversant with what you would call it?
I will allow it.
It's community storytelling by a group whose purpose is to have adventurous fun in a shared environment with a leader who is more than just a referee. It's not like sports or other games where the one calling the shots and judging the outcomes is a non-participant. The referee in this case, the game master, is very much a participant. You, the player, and there's usually 4 to 6, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes fewer, sorry, players. Um, each play one significant role, and then the game master plays every other role. All the NPCs, that's where you get the NPC term, non player character, and just anyone that the players might encounter in this exercise in cooperative storytelling. Now, role playing games are traditionally played around a table in a social setting. Not always the case now in these days of shelter in place from the plague. Now, the online services make continuing these games possible. But role playing is also a term that's been adopted by the video game industry. I am again this, meaning I don't believe that video games for all of their wondrousness and they truly are. I first became interested in video games as a role playing kind of supplement or tool back in the days of Pong and I was at TSR when some game designers came and stayed at my house while waiting to pitch the idea to TSR of a Dungeons and Dragons based video game that was a graphics on the level of Pong, where there's a maze laid out and your players are little dots on the screen, and monster players, I think, were little asterisks. And it was a movement based thing. And sometimes the asterisks would catch up to the little dots and there'd be a fight adjudicated by the computer. And I thought that was amazing. I go, oh, this is going to revolutionize role playing games. And now we have something like Brad and I agreed beforehand that we would use Red Dead Redemption as the example of video so-called role-playing games today, only because Brad and I both play the game. You're still playing Red Dead, aren't you, Brad?
I am still playing. It's one of the few out there that give me the open world, first person, basically do what you want to do when you want to do it. So that's the draw.
Right. And in that sense, the open world games, which I believe are the Aristotelian acme of video games, do replicate role playing in that aspect. In that a good open world game, you can go where you want, when you want, and do what you want to do within very tight frameworks. And yes, around the table role playing games have frameworks imposed by the game master as well. But, and you knew there was going to be a but because you looked at the title, but they are not role playing games. Brad, would you like to know why they're not role playing games?
I would like to know why you say they're not role playing games.
Uh, because you, the player, can't choose your role. Your role in video games is imposed upon you. To use the Jeff D analogy, and I apologize to Jeff because he used this analogy in some video that I'd seen, and I can't recall the exact video. Otherwise, I'd just send you over there for a more cogent analysis. But to use the Jeff D illustration of why video games are not role playing games is the 3 grains of sand rule. The 3 grains of sand rule are simply in a video game, you cannot decide to pick up 3 grains of sand and examine them. The game just can't anticipate that. The game doesn't actually have interaction between you and a game master who's thinking on his feet and responding to your direct requests or attempts to accomplish things. And I think that is the essence of the role playing game, where there's at least 2 people playing roles, you and the fellow running the game or the woman running the game. In this case, in every video game, the game master is a robot. It's pre-recorded stuff. Characters you encounter will say the same things over and over again. Remember, I used to be a guard in the such and such until I took an arrow to the knee. It became
Yes.
a meme
Yep.
after a while. That was from Skyrim. And that guy, that character in that Skyrim game, will say that to you every time you encounter him because they're little pre-programmed robots that are intended to give you the illusion of encounters with non-player characters, but only that. And in Red Dead Redemption, that is in many ways more insidious because it's so well done. It is so well rendered. It is possibly the finest rendered video game ever. Agree or disagree?
Oh, I think it's absolutely glorious to look at and to play, especially in that first person mode.
Yes, it's just an environment that is a joy to romp amongst. And I wish other open world game designers would adopt this attitude of make everything that's real look as real as possible. So that the unreal aspects, I checked out some game where you're fighting monsters in a fantasy world, and the rendering of the fantasy world was so over the top and kind of everything is alien and weird that there was no point of comfortable reference. There was no point at which you're saying, okay, here's a world I believe in. Oh, look at that! Here comes a monster that's suddenly a surprise in this world I believe in. Red Dead does not have monsters in the sense of things that don't exist in an old West environment. The very first Red Dead Redemption that was not an online, but it was an open world, did have a version you could switch to where you're fighting zombies. Did you ever play that, Brad?
I didn't play any of the non-online versions.
Oh, okay. But yeah, that was interesting. I get bored easily of zombies. I played it for a little bit, but I would love an environment like in Red Dead where suddenly a herd of velociraptors comes over the bluff and are coming at you. That would be a surprise and a delight. But we both agree it's just a wonderfully rendered game. It's very playable. I have a few problems with it. One of them being with the weather department. Brad, you know my problems with the weather department, don't you?
It is ridiculous how much rain there is in the desert, I think starts the rant.
The rainy desert. There's a desert environment in Red Dead Redemption, wherein it rains every single day, sometimes twice a day, and that doesn't always count the thunderstorm and the wet fog. This is such a rainy environment. Why is it a desert? I ask myself, and that is a point of story disengagement. I believe the weather is set so that whatever happens somewhere happens everywhere in the world. Not only being in one part of that world at any one time, I don't know if that's absolutely true. However, it rains a lot in the desert. My problem, rain is not rain in the desert. Other than knowing that it wouldn't be a desert if it had that much rain, isn't so much a problem as it's a wonderfully rendered environment in which there's so much weather and it's wonderfully rendered weather. And maybe this is why there's so much of it that you very often, most often, you cannot see the environment in which you were playing. You can't see it clearly. My theory is that the weather rendering department was working a tight deadline one day. They had to get all the thunderstorms and the snowstorms and the fogs and the this and the that uh, finished in time for launch. And the leader of that department, knowing that his gang was just working feverishly, had a ton of pizzas brought in as a reward because they were about to hit their 3 o'clock deadline. And those pizzas sat at the front desk at reception just as the uh, main environment rendering team was on their way to lunch. And suddenly they see all these pizzas and they say, "Ha, free pizza." And they gobble it up, and it's like, ha ha ha, we sure showed those weather rendering guys. We took all their pizza. What a scam. And the weather rendering guys were so pissed that they said, okay, there's going to be so much weather in Red Dead Redemption that you will never, ever get to really see the wonderfully rendered environment.
The
And so it's a
wonderful
few going.
buttes, the excellent mesas, they're all obscured now.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. Most of the time I play it, it is either nighttime, which is about half the time on very short cycling game days, or there's obscuring rain, or there's obscuring fog. Sometimes fog so obscuring that you just cannot. You're about to ride off a cliff. Well, that's too bad for you. They even had an event on April 1st of a worldwide snowstorm um, that was even down in the snowy desert. Um, that desert, boy, does it get a lot of moisture. Um, but anyway, and that's my biggest problem with Red Dead is that I like playing games wherein you can see your environment. Um, and in this one, you most of the time you cannot. The times when it's sunny and you can actually see what you're doing are a minority of the time of gameplay. That's a little bit beside the point. What it is, it's not a role playing game. You play the roles assigned to you. If you're going to be one of the, what do they have? Four, they have a generic just do anything role everyone
Right,
plays. Then you can either be a moonshiner, a hunter, or a trader of skins and things like
right.
that.
A
A
collector,
collector,
right?
and what else?
Bounty hunter.
And bounty hunter. And very self-explanatory. There's only one of those roles you can play if you don't want to be a mass murderer, and that's collector. And even then, you're robbing people of their heirlooms and such. You're actually entering their houses and taking their stuff. But that's the nicest person you can play in Red Dead Redemption. Everything else, if you're a moonshiner, you're going to kill a lot of federal agents. A lot. I mean, 20 at a time, several times a day, if you want to advance speedily. If you're a trader, you're sent on many missions to get your processing supplies, taking them away from other traders. Bounty hunter, well, you're going to go bring in bounties. At least those are wanted people, but they're surrounded by posses of protectors, and you're going to kill every one of them. The bounties, the actual target, are the only ones you're allowed to bring in alive. Everyone else, you kill. You kill, you kill, you kill, you kill. Um, that is the role you're going to play. You don't have the option of saying, well, I'm just going to build a trading post out in this area and trade to the Indians which you cannot find in the game because they don't exist. There's actually an Indian reservation in which apparently someone lives there because the lights are on during in the locked cabins at night. But you cannot talk to an Indian in Red Dead Redemption because apparently that's just not politically correct, I would say. There's very little you can do. You cannot build in this. The closest you can do is you can add a saloon to the basement of your moonshiner shack, a pre-made saloon. You cannot build, you cannot set your own goals, you cannot tell the game master, what I want to do is win back my kingdom, or what I want to do is open an inn at the crossroads. What I would like to do as a character is establish a school, or whatever your goal as a character might be. You cannot set those in any online role playing game because they can't anticipate that because it's not interactive.
Well, that then the question is, it is interactive to an extent. It's not interactive to that level. Where does it become, where does it hit that line? I mean, do you have to be able to go to the 3 grains level of interactive, or can you just, open every door that's in the game, or pick up every object, or where's the level? What's the line?
That is a good question, and I think we're almost out of time. So I think that is the question on which we should end this. And then we will fight you. I will fight you in the comments if you choose to debate this. The line is the 3 grains of sand question. Not is it important to be able to examine 3 grains of sand? I don't think it is. I don't think I've ever tried it in a role playing game. But in any role playing game in which you're playing with and against a thinking human, you can say, I want to examine 3 grains of sand, and that game master will adjudicate that in some way. He may say, well, you're in a world that's a giant pane of glass, so you're not going to be able to examine 3 grains of sand. Or you're lost at sea in a rowboat. There are no grains of sand, whatever. In some way, a thinking person will adjudicate. And that's where the line is drawn. Is there a thinking person in real time adjudicating the things you attempt to do? If there's not, it's not a role playing game. That's where I draw my, wait for it, line in the sand.
Oh, wow. I did not duck out of the way of that one in time.
Anything to add, Brad? We're about done here.
No, that's just appreciate everybody sticking with us through all of this and the new format. And thanks for all the interaction in the comments and the likes and the shares. Keep it up. Appease those YouTube algorithm gods for us.
And note that since Brad and I are still doing these videos, or for the second week in a row, doing these videos remotely from each other, because the whole shelter in place, and Brad lives clear on the other side of this town that I'm outside of. We are not doing a live sketching, as you may have guessed in this video. However, um, a sketch that is thematically relevant to this will be available. I did a black and white illustration of a drow elf from the first role-playing game, which was D&D, that has been languishing, ignored in eBay for a while. Brad, when does that come out of the eBay lockup and come to our store?
By the time they hear this, it will have closed. It actually closes on the day we're recording, and we have bids on it now.
Okay. Oh, we have bids on it.
Yeah.
Oh, well then that can't be the sketch for this one. All right, by the time this airs, in the pencil sketches section of my store, I will have something to do with role-playing games, and that is my sketch to go with this episode. Thank you very much. Please subscribe. Please like us. Please participate in the comments. And next time, I think we've had more questions pile up, and we'll take questions. Anything else, Brad?
Nope, we are good to go. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Where's my stop recording button?